Cindy?
Yep.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Committee Member Hodges. Absent. Susan Horn. Hillary Blackerby.
Here.
Eve Sanford.
Here.
Andres Melavos.
Here.
And David Collum.
Here.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none, but I would like to introduce you to David Collum, who's your newest Transportation Circulation Committee member. And Jessica and I had the pleasure of getting to know him and meeting him. We gave him the lay of the land. We told him that you guys would welcome him in, so now you gotta make good on our promise.
Boy.
And then also I wanted to recognize Roxanne Bonderson, who is a newer planning commissioner, and she is our new liaison, which we just discovered tonight,
Terrific.
which is
Terrific.
awesome to have her here. So welcome. It's very nice for her to attend. No changes to the agenda.
Okay, well, we have a time for public comment on non-specific items, if anyone has anything they want to say at this time. I know a number of you have comments to make on specific topics. This is it, okay. All right, then let's move to the consent calendar. We need approval of minutes from the October 24th meeting.
Move approval.
Did you get that, Mindy? Second? Anybody second? All in favor? Who was there?
Discussion. Aye.
You guys were there. Any opposition? I don't think so. I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
I'm also
You weren't there?
abstaining
Okay. Okay, we're done with that. Now, we typically receive the quarterly report from MTD, and we did this time, and we generally don't discuss it. It comes to the attention of the committee members, and if there's anything outstanding or unusual, we'll bring it up at the meeting. But it seems to be a pretty typical quarterly MTD report from the waterfront shuttle. And so if there's no objections, I'll move along. All right,
Report 3.
yeah, number 3.
Oh, I would like to give give
mic.
input on that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sure,
I'd like to give input on that one.
sure. Let me find my copy. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think overall, I would just like to say that I'm really excited about the new alignment through the funk zone and the new stop that that MTD put in adjacent to Oriana Winery, or right at the intersection there. I think that's a great direction to be going in. I guess I would like to just raise a topic or question around just the city considering finding a way to make the shuttle free for riders. And long before my time in the city, I hear that it was once free. And I know that the sorry, I'm a little sick. I know that the consultant report for the downtown business corridor, the consultants for that revitalization study did give a recommendation around exploring making it free. And I know this, I guess I would put the question to the staff about if there's any sort of movement to study that or discuss that further.
Committee Member Sanford, yes, we have looked at that extensively, working with MTD. We have come up with a day pass that we have been working with them on, and that we help pay for the production of that pass and then pushing it out. So what happens with a day pass is a rider can use it all day, so they can use it multiple directions. I think we set the price at that at 50 cents, $1. $1, and then but the hotels are giving it away. A lot of, well, that's what we've heard. A lot of them are giving it away. So we're hoping that is a good inroad to that. The reason that the shuttle went from free to costing was because there were certain members of the community that were riding it all day and not getting off. And so that was challenging for the ridership. And so that was the decision to do that. We can continue to look at that with the downtown parking committee who runs that program.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I guess I asked this in the larger context that I feel like a lot of places that, I guess the revenue from it is, so to the point that I wonder if the benefit of us just covering the cost of operating it and, maybe the sort of non-monetary benefit and that maybe increased visitors to downtown and, sort of less barriers to use for for all the visitors that we have. I wonder if that would kind of outweigh the current revenue that we're getting. I also wanted to just kind of lodge a comment around, I know they're redesigning De La Guerra Plaza, and I was looking at some of the sort of initial plans for that, which overall I'm very excited for. I encourage everyone here to go kind of take a look at some of the concepts that are coming up. And I wonder if, I know that accessibility to De La Guerra Plaza and providing access for all of the farmers market visitors is a pretty big priority for the city. And I wonder how the MTD shuttle, might, if it was just to be free on a weekend, for example, could that maybe help address some of the access issues around De La Guerra Plaza and the farmers market. So yeah, thank you for your answer. And I would support any sort of movement in the direction of further reducing the cost from $1 to $0. Thank you.
I have one question before we proceed. Cole, I don't have an item number for you. Which topic are you interested in addressing? Sure. Got it.
Item 4.
That's 4. Item 4 on the agenda. There you go. Well, they're rolling in now, aren't they? Okay. I think we do have one public question about item 3. So, Wilson Hubble, would you like to come forward? Please, you need to speak from there because we're live. And don't forget to turn on your microphone. I don't know.
Got it.
There you go.
Madam Chair, sorry for the screw up. I actually here for item 4, and I accidentally put down item 3.
Okay,
so
well, you may sit down then.
Thank
We'll
you.
get to you. Thank you very much. You had your audition. There you go. Okay. All right, well, we have a pretty intense agenda tonight with some really important topics. A lot of work has been done on them. The topics that we're going to discuss tonight in preparation, so we're really happy to hear from the staff. So we'll move right now, I think, to the La Cumbre Junior High Modoc Cycle Track and Multi-Use Path Project.
Yes, and Madam Chair and committee members, before I turn it over to Jessica Grant and the team, this is a big night. It really, really is. There are going to be potentially 4 active transportation planning grants that are going to be submitted by the city of Santa Barbara. Your agenda tonight includes 3 of those projects. The one that's not on the agenda is the Cliff Drive, which you've seen in the past, and that went to council, and council blessed that for permission for us to pursue a grant. So we're moving forward with that. And then these are 3 other processes that are pretty huge. And so when you think about that with the active transportation planning grant and where we are now with that, the city of Santa Barbara has been very successful in the state of California of getting that money. We're up there at the top, the leading competitors for that money and earners in our category, over $40 million. With the census happening, we do predict that we will move out of the 200,000 population range into a different range, which will put us into a different pond of competition, which is going to be a lot more challenging for us, we predict. So the reason we're really being aggressive, and you've got so much on your agenda, is we've been really pushing to try to resolve the neighborhood issues that we know or were aware somewhat about, and in the bicycle master plan and the circulation element, to try to get them staged for this grant opportunity. Every one of these projects in the recommendation, based on your comments, will be sent to the council after the first one is March 10th for the west side, and then I don't know if you chose a date yet for I think it's, we'll find it, a date for the next, and you're welcome to participate in council when we get there. So the 24th. So with that, we'll start with what is a portion of the West Side plan, and it's a portion we weren't able to complete before you saw the West Side plan, and now we're going back on Modoc, and Jessica will explain all that for you.
Good evening, Chair Rodriguez and committee members. Jessica Grant with the City of Santa Barbara Public Works. Our recommendation tonight for this particular project, after you hear the presentation about the two path layout options before you, is to find that option 2 is the preferred option and consistent. We hope that you find it consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element. Then under that is the pedestrian master plan, bicycle master plan, and then include this option 2 in the west side and lower west transportation management plan. So how is this connected to the west side and lower west transportation management planning effort? This is an effort we've been doing over the past year to get information about from residents with respect to walking, biking, and traffic in the west side and lower west neighborhoods. In addition, for our public outreach, we held a listening workshop, a community survey, and then an approach workshop. These are all the pieces that then fed into the transportation management plan. You saw that at our last TCC meeting, and then you moved it forward to go to City Council. One of the items in there was the concept for the multi-use path, but at the time we needed to dive into more of the details. But what we heard at those workshops, with just respect to traveling along the Modoc, is we've received a lot of consensus from the community that there was a need for a stronger bike route in the connection from Mission to Las Positas along Modoc Road, and then also the connector piece along Puerto Suelo. And this is all in the vicinity of La Cumbre Junior High and the Santa Barbara Community Academy. That's also at the La Cumbre Junior High campus, which is an elementary school. In addition to the stronger bike route, we definitely heard concerns of just the faster moving vehicles along this stretch of road. And we also heard concerns of a few of the intersections that are very difficult to navigate for all road users at the intersection of Modoc and Mission, as well as Modoc and Puerto Suelo and Modoc and Pilgrim Terrace. Those are the two big feeder intersections to the La Cumbre Junior High and Santa Barbara Community Academy. So what was known, again, we received consensus that we needed to have a stronger bike route at the approach workshop, but we had known constraints. We knew that the right-of-way is limited in along Modoc Road. There's a lot of mature street trees. There is on-street parking that's available during mainly the evening hours. And then also that we had some difficult intersections. Modoc is not a linear street. There is a bend to it that I'll point out further. Could you move the microphone? Sure. So also post the approach workshop, we had the area surveyed to get more details about the Modoc right-of-way. Why we think, in addition to this workshop, why the community will still continue to voice for a stronger bicycle connection is we have two big bicycle projects coming in the next few years. What's set for construction this summer is the Modoc and Las Positas multi-use path that starts along Modoc at Calle de los Amigos and then goes all the way to the Las Positas intersection, and then it comes towards Royal Borough Beach. That's a 2.6 mile multi-use path. Also coming online is to look or to have bicycle boulevards. That was a grant-funded application from the Active Transportation Program. We're in the middle of pursuing a scope change for the to transfer from Chino to San Pasquale and Gillespie. You heard that during our last presentation. But anyway, these are coming online in the next couple of years. And this is where we have identified as a gap in our network, which is along Modoc and Puerto Suelo. So this is just a basic graphic of what the layout options are. Included in your staff packet is the details of these routes. We analyzed two, one being a multi-use path along the school side or south side that would go from Las Positas to Puerto Suelo, and then along Puerto Suelo it would hug basically the school campus. What we were not proposing, we didn't feel comfortable extending the two-way multi-use path to Mission Street because there are some very difficult sight lines along this bend. It's specifically at Eucalyptus, Quincha, and Puerto Suelo. That if you introduce two-way traffic here, it's sort of it's a like blind turn for vehicles turning there, and we didn't feel comfortable introducing that two-way traffic in that section. So what we proposed instead was just to have buffered bike lanes in that section from Puerto Suelo to Mission Street. Option 2 would have a separated path, or also known as a cycle track, and it would be on the north side. So opposite the school side, this one you could have go all the way from Mission to Las Positas. As far as for the sightlines to introduce that two-way traffic, the intersections from having it on the north side at those key intersections, you have really good visibility of cyclists navigating that intersection. In either option, you also have both options have a multi-use path along Puerto Suelo. Some of the issues with the multi-use path on the school side is that it would eliminate 26 trees, street trees that would be removed, and then we'd plant with new plants in the new planter area. With option 2, it would be approximately just a removal of about 2 street trees. With option 2, the issues here where there's a couple of bus stop locations in this vicinity where my mouse is, we would take the separated path behind the bus stop location, so you'd have a little bit of a jog there. I'll spend the next few minutes going over the connectivity to the adjacent streets to see what that looks like. This is just a quick graph summary of the operational analysis that's in your staff report. But this is pros and cons for each of the connection pieces. For having option 1, a multi-use path on the south side, if you were to connect from the future Las Positas Modoc multi-use path, it would be one crossing location across Las Positas. For option 2, it is not as ideal, but we still feel that it would be sufficient. It would be a 2 crossing approach where cyclists could either cross as you follow the mouse in this location, or you could cross Las Positas here and then cross Modoc at that location and dive into the multi-use path. For the connectivity at Mission, this would be just one-way traffic coming in and out for cyclists. This, again, is not the highest level facility. We're really trying to have all age users because it is feeding to a school, and this would just be on-street buffered lanes. But it would just be one crossing location. And this little section is proposed with the bicycle boulevard location where you would have it's like a mini multi-use path, so you don't have to navigate in the street along this very busy section of Mission Street to get on to San Pasquale. That we see that's a big commute location, and we needed to make sure that connection is strong. So in option 2, it is just one crossing, but you immediately go into a buffered cycle track. The connectivity for Puerto Suelo, option 1 is just a nice, strong connection. You just have to cross Modoc Road right here. That would, option 2, and that would be with a stronger connect with the pedestrian flashing beacons, and then there would be a little bit of a refuge area here to cross into school. This one's a little, again, depending on your destinations, but if you want to go into town area and hook via the San Pasquale Street, then you would have to navigate and then go into the buffered bike lane here. So I guess with all of that said, and looking at all the connectivity and overall safety, staff is recommending that option 2, if you look at all the operational analysis, has just the slight edge on overall performance and a higher level attraction for all ages and abilities. So both options do impact on-street parking. In this analysis, it's not a complete apples to apples. I'll go over how we divided and analyzed it. You're either west of La Cumbre Junior High or east of La Cumbre Junior or High. And so west of La Cumbre Junior High, there's 27 overnight parking spaces. With option 1, it would be a decrease to 18 overnight spaces. With option 2, this is where I say it's not apples to apples. It would be, in this case, you would have 21 all-day parking spaces. When we did just the typical occupancy demand for the overnight parking, this is when we were counting in the evening hours. It was approximately 8 to 16 vehicles that we saw in this section of roadway. East of La Cumbre Junior High, there was approximately 49 overnight spaces. In option 1, that would still remain the same. Option 2 would go to 23 all-day spaces. Again, when we did our typical occupancy, it was about 9 to 18 for the overnight demand that we were seeing. So in either option, although it decreases with whatever option you go with, there is a decrease in parking, but we feel the on-street parking demand would still be met in either scenario. Yeah.
Add to that. I just want to add to that. I just want to say that parking is a very sensitive issue in Santa Barbara. I think it's the number one issue of anything we talk about, based on the emotions that come out because of it. One of the things that's kind of interesting about this that we don't really knew about, and we really wanted to get an idea from the neighbors. If there's more neighbors here who want to talk about parking, that'd be awesome to hear. But the change in the type of parking, because right now it's restricted during the day, so you can't park on Modoc during the day until the evening. So at 6 p.m. you can start parking, and then you'd have to move your car at 7 a.m. So all of the parking available, but only between 6 p.m. and 7 a.m. And the shift is that more than half the parking would be available, but it would be available all the time. So it's really interesting. We heard some narratives about some people coming home who like to they came home and they put their car on the side street and then they move out in front of their house when they could, and that was really great. And then when they left in the morning, it was good. Wasn't anticipating that comment. But our thought is it could be better because then there'd be more people parking when they want. When they get home from work, they just park out on the street, half the street all the time. And it could be worse if there was this overwhelming demand for the day, and we're just not sure. But what we do know is that all the parking at night is not used. It's not highly used. So unlike other places where you have full-time parking all day, all night, where people come from work, and on the west side, the street's packed with cars. Because of the restriction now, all the parking's not used. So Jessica gave you the numbers based on the demand we're seeing out there now. But just to kind of think about that as you're weighing the options and considering that, putting on this path, parking does change, but it changes from available all the time versus from being available only at night to available, half of it being available all the time, if that makes any sense. We can answer more questions.
So feedback from the approach workshop, as Mr. Dayton mentioned, the comments that we were receiving with respect to on-street parking. There wasn't a unanimous option other than that there wasn't like a clear preference on which option from the community at the workshop, but there was a general consensus to still have a higher level biking facility along Modoc Road. I had a couple pictures in here of just if we did move forward with option 2 of what certain bike path buffers look like in other communities. I don't think any of the photos that I will share with you are hit the nail for Santa Barbara style. That's something that if we were to receive design funding, that we would want to have something that meets our Santa Barbara style metrics, but I'll show a few photos. This is a photo in Seattle. The reason we're showing this photo is just in terms of real estate. This is essentially the width that we're working with for Modoc Road. In this particular scenario, it's just a curb. And they actually have about 1 more foot more than we would have in Modoc. This is in Vancouver, I believe, and they use planter boxes as the buffer area and delineators. This is it's called the armadillo, or in some locations, I guess it's an armadillo if it's yellow and black, and then there's others that we see white and black that they call it the zebra. But this is in Europe, somewhere with a mini hedge. And this is in, I believe, Spain. Again, it's just to kind of give you an idea, because in that buffer we have about a 2 to 3 foot area that we can provide that buffer in. We definitely, I think, for the feedback is to not make it a COTA style bike lane with just the delineators. That I think we're looking for something a little bit more to tie in with the flavor of the West Side neighborhood, and something more that doesn't look like a construction zone, something that's more permanent. So getting back to the recommendation, we are recommending option 2, and in the staff report, I pointed out some of the policies that it's consistent with the Vision Zero strategy and circulation element. And then and to also include it in the West Side and Lower West Transportation Management Plan, and that is set to go before City Council on March 10th. With that, I close my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yes, we have questions. Hillary?
Thank you for this, Jessica. So say more about in option 2, the cycle track or whatever we're calling it, going behind the bus stop? And just to clarify, there are actually 7 bus stops in this corridor, and there's only one marked on this that I can see, so just, anyway.
Good evening, Derek Bailey with the Public Works Department. There would be 2 bus stops impacted by the option 2. There's 3, pardon me, that I can count in my head. 3? Does that sound right? 7 sounds really high. At any rate,
Google Maps.
there's really good examples out there of bus stops that have been built, and there's basically an 8-foot loading island, an ADA accessible loading island, and the pathway would have to narrow slightly and then meander around the bus stop and then back onto the street. So the bus would have to stop in the lane. There would be no room for a pull-out. But that's essentially what it would look like.
So, okay. So it's sort of a level, kind of, the road humps up a little, or flattens up.
Exactly. Yeah. The if you can think of the sidewalk level, the bus stop would be even with that level, and the path would kind of come up, meet that level, and then go down the other side.
Okay. At each location?
At each bus stop.
Okay. And then so I guess the sort of street furniture could stay where it is because nothing's going to happen to the sidewalk itself through this corridor, or?
That's a discussion point. There's 8 feet to work with as far as a loading zone for bus accessibility. So whether or not the furniture is relocated to that 8 feet or it stays where it is, there's design options.
Okay. And then further down, I'm wondering further down. So the main one that's in front of the community garden, which is a major
Pilgrim
time point on
Terrace.
the line 1. I'm wondering if is the street width the same through the whole corridor in those other sections? Because I can see in that, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up, but it feels like there's a little more room over there as opposed to the ones that are further back towards Mission, stop there, and then the one that's near, Hacienda?
Yeah, the street is generally about 40 feet wide throughout the entire corridor. Kind of the western end of Pilgrim Terrace, right across from the school. Does narrow down by a few feet in there, but generally we have 40 feet to work with.
Okay. And there's no concerns of stopping in the lane around that corner? Because now, I mean, it's true, there's a bit of a shoulder.
A bit. There is no way to get past the buses right now and stay fully in your lane.
That's true.
It is a constricted area just because there's bus stops on both sides, and there is a left turn lane that's starting to open right there. So, no, operationally, we think it would be fine.
Okay.
Anybody else with questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a few questions. If it's okay with everyone, I'm just going to go like in sort of chronological order from the staff report. I also had questions about the bus stop, but I feel like they're pretty addressed. I guess my next question is about the trees. Like, is there a plan to replace them, and what does that plan look like for the 2 trees that get removed?
So for the preferred option, the areas that there would be tree removal is basically at the corners of Modoc and Suelo and Modoc and Pilgrim Terrace. Those are the key school crossings, and it's just to establish better line of sight. But we would work with the street tree advisory and Parks and Recreation on planting back the removed trees to have another location elsewhere along the right-of-way. Option 1, it would be the removal of about approximately 26 trees. And again, it would be planting new trees in the new landscape planner areas. And as far as for the detail, we're not at those details yet, but that's essentially if you remove biomass, you need to replace with biomass, and then there's a whole recipe on what that looks like in a planting scheme.
Okay, great, thank you. My second question is about the utility impacts that are anticipated. I guess this is pretty minor, but does that affect the viability of either of these projects?
There,
not?
yes, there for the option one, we're more utility heavy on the school side of Modoc Road, so there are a lot more utility conflicts with that option that would make option one definitely more costly to build. There will still be some utility conflicts on the with option two, but not as significant as we anticipate with option one.
Okay, thank you. My third question was about the Puerto Suelo path portion. I'm not totally familiar with like how this alignment will go, but are there any concerns with line of sight from driveways on that street? As I know it's a concern on Modoc. I don't know if it's a factor in that path.
I did put it up on the screen. It's a little hard to tell, but it is an existing sidewalk that hugs the right of way here, and so we'd widen this area to 9 feet. And so it depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from the bicycle boulevard from Gillespie, then you have a nice, strong connection right into the school. The main bike corral area for the junior high is right at this location here. So it's a pretty quick connection there.
Okay, great.
And then for advanced cyclists that not wanting to hop on the multi-use path, you would still have school drop off and pick up in this section of road. And then for advanced riders, you could still be on the road at this section of the street as well.
Okay, thank you. I guess another question I would ask about this project, especially given the new crossings that are going to be put in place. I'm trying not to give comments and just questions, but is there any budget to have a 1 year or maybe 2 year kind of crossing guard program that could help get new students that are biking and new parents that are navigating a new situation? I know that's not something that's in an ATP budget, but would the city have funding to look into something like that to help the neighborhood adjust? I could lodge that as like a comment later.
Well, as far as for the active transportation budget, in addition to infrastructure, there is a portion that you can apply for non-infrastructure that becomes with like education. So if we build the facility, that's something that we could work with the schools on to have targeted outreach once the infrastructure is in place, and to have work with our partners like SB Bike and Coast on planned rides to go along this stretch.
Okay, great. I guess I have a question about the parking survey that was done along that portion of Modoc. And I'm just curious, do people have garages on that portion? And I know Santa Barbara's like very, unconventionally dense, and that just because you have a garage doesn't mean that there's only one person using that garage, and there could be, multiple units to each property. But I would just wonder how personal garages factor into parking along that stretch.
There's a number of apartment buildings that have less than one space per unit. And we used to say in the 90s that about half the people in Santa Barbara use their garage to park their car. I think that's probably down to like maybe 10%, 20%. I mean, it's just such a valuable space to people. So that's really unfortunate, because I think in your question, Committee Member Sanford, what you're getting at is, come on, that's where you should park. And the challenge is when we say that doesn't go over very well. So, that is the issue. And if you weren't here, I think, for that meeting, but we also got into on the west side when we were doing the listening workshop. The west side has a real big concern about parking, congested parking in the evening. And part of that issue is also there are a lot of people who, as a part of their business, have their vehicles that they bring home as a part of their business, which is a really good way of making it all work and affordable, but then is also adding to the congestion in the parking. So to answer your question, it's a big challenge for us. And it's actually shifted us in the planning world to maybe not favor the requirement of garages, but do carports instead, because carports are more likely to be used than garages.
Thank you. That's really interesting context. I guess my second question to the parking is, currently I'm aware that you do have to move your car there in the daytime, and I'm wondering, is it safe to assume that people are, I don't know if you figured this out in your parking survey, are people just taking their cars with them to where they're going in the daytime, or can we assume that the cars are just moving to the next block over where the parking restrictions are lifted and that block is then absorbing in the parking? I don't know if you got into that level of analysis, but I just thought I would ask.
We did not go to
Okay.
that level.
Great. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Susan?
Okay, I just wondered if there's a good map on here to look at to talk about sort of the crux of problems at the school, at any school, seem to be drop-offs and pickups, but especially drop-offs in the morning. And I'm just wondering what is the pattern? I heard you say that street there, Puerto Suelo, was a drop-off area, but I thought a wiser thing would be if people could actually go into the parking lot and drop their kids off by the school, but I don't know about making that turn, and I mean, what is the setup for that, dropping off?
Committee member Horn, it's both. You have the two choices. You can go into the parking lot, or you can drop along curbside. And we were doing just a lot of operational analysis. We always try to be at school operation times, and so my experiences with the families were using both options.
Is there parking along that people could just pull in at the Puerto Suelo opposite the school, or on the side of the school if they're coming that direction? Is there room for people to pull out of the cross traffic to park for a few minutes to drop off their kid, or no?
This is on the school side. There's the pull over on the school location, but on this side, the opposite school side?
The southern part of Puerto Suelo is generally parked out with vehicles for the adjacent residences. The north side is a continuous passenger loading zone. School buses don't pull into the parking lot. They'll often drop off at the curb. Depending on how busy the parking lot drop-off areas, we see a lot of parents dropping off at the curb as well, so it's a real mix. But I haven't observed many being dropped off in the south side, not nearly as many as the north side.
It used to be it was really a problem because parents were stopping on Modoc. And then that became inaccessible with red curb or something. So now they're all stuck going there.
Right.
So it's a traffic problem, I'm sure.
Well, and it's also at staggered times for both the junior high and the elementary school. I don't have the exact times, but I do know that not every drop off is not all at the same time. And there's some junior high students that have a 0 period, so they're
7 o'clock.
Yes. And then again, the elementary school has a different time than the junior high. So I think that's why every school drop off feels a little chaotic, but it's not as chaotic
As it could be.
as it could be. Yes.
Thank you.
David, do you have anything?
No.
Okay.
Just taking it in.
Taking it all in. Mr. Malovos, how do you pronounce that?
Malivos.
Malovos.
Yeah. Quick question on the width of the bike lane in option 2. I know we talked about machines sweeping, both option 1 and option 2. Is option 2 wide enough to be swept by machine? And then second, what's the interval in which they are swept?
Street sweepers are about 9 feet wide, so the path itself would be 9 feet wide plus the buffer, so there is room for the sweeper to fit down this area. Right now, Modoc is swept very infrequently. It's not part of any routine sweeping schedule like the residential or the commercial areas, which have their own pots of funding. So that's something that could be improved upon through this process as well.
Is it swept by request, or how does that work?
Yes, and we, just based on observation, if there's any obstructions in the road, we'll send them out for special sweeps as well.
Thank you.
I have a kind of an overview question. We've talked a lot of detail. This is all very close to where I live, and I'm still a little confused. I'd really like it if you could walk me through. If I know the bike path between Puerto Suelo and Calle de los Amigos hasn't been built yet, but I'm trying to refresh my memory. Is it going to be all on one side, on the south side? South, whatever south is.
Yes, Chair Rodriguez, it will be on the south side.
So if you'd be so kind, take me as a cyclist from there across Las Positas through all of this zone and tell me where I'm going to maneuver my bike. I'm just having a real hard time picturing the overview.
Sure. For option 2, just to clarify.
Yes, for option
so
2.
for option 2, if you came to the corner, which is sort of like a pork chop. Let me get to
Have
the
a
slide.
Yeah. I think it was one of the early ones.
It's this one. Let's see. Puerto Suelo. Okay. Thank you. Is it at Puerto Suelo, just to confirm? Chair Rodriguez,
Yes.
is it Puerto Suelo and Modoc? Is that what you wanted? Or
I'm
for
asking,
at
if you
Las
can go
Positas?
back to page, the West Side, Lower West Side Workshop map,
What page is that?
I
Page
think
number?
it's 6, slide number 6.
Oh.
That one.
This one.
Page 3.
Either that one or the next one. If I'm riding my bike, I'm going to be on a separate bike path along Modoc. What happens in the red zone?
Okay.
What side of the street am I going to be on, or is it going to be
Okay.
divided? I'm having a hard time
Okay. So you.
picturing that.
For some reason, I apologize. I cut this off, but it's the same thing. It's like so this would be coming from the Modoc Las Positas path. So there would be sorry, I'm trying to get in either option, you're doing this crossing right here.
Okay.
And then you come to this refuge area. So
Okay.
for option 2, in this refuge area, I'll hop over here. You can either cross Modoc at this location and then wrap around a little mini path here and then cross Las Positas onto the cycle track.
Okay.
Or you can be in this refuge area, cross at the Las Positas at this leg of the intersection, and then you would have one more crossing. So it's either way you're crossing Modoc and Las Positas twice to get to the cycle track.
And so it will be a cycle track, just the cycle track is on the other side of the road before.
Yes.
Then you come and you go either direction.
Correct.
And then, but you're going to be on a cycle track on the north side of the road.
Correct.
Is that my understanding?
That's correct.
Okay, it was so much information, it was hard for me to picture. So is that going to be the exclusive new style in this gap area? It's going to be on one side of the street, no more bike lanes on either side?
Yes, that's correct for the, yes,
For the gap area?
yes.
For option
For-
two.
for option
I
two.
think
But
it's
for-
important to understand a little bit about the why. So we have bike lanes on Modoc right now. This is a really heavily used commute corridor. So in some ways you could say, oh, well, this is a successful corridor. So now we're messing with the corridor and changing it. Why would we do that? We're doing that to feed into the strong, Jessica went over the strong connections that are being built on the west side and on Las Positas. One of the edges is right here, Las Positas and Modoc. When this path is in, there's going to be a greater demand from the west side to get to this path. The path is a very, it's a low barrier path. It can serve your kids will be on it. A lot of parents will be fine with their kids going now to Henry's Beach. So the challenge for us in developing this new connection is how do we sustain the healthy commuter path and then also introduce a lower barrier of safety so that people who have perceived issues or aren't as confident on the road can be there. So that's the balance you're looking at. I think that the reason we're leaning toward option two is because we believe it serves both of those needs better. Serves the commuter that's existing better than the other one, and the one that needs protection better. Because if you're coming in protection and you're in option one and you're off street, you can't make it to San Pasquale. You don't get to make it. And just can you go to I think it's the next slide. So for the cyclist that's a commuter, so they're on the street, they're commuting. They're going to continue to commute. They're not going to go off on this path right here. They're not going to use that path. They're on the street. They're aggressive riders. So they maybe even coming back from town across Mission. So they've got, the interchange is right up here. They just turn right, and they're on it like they would be a normal path, although it's now protected from vehicles and parkers. So one of the issues we hear today on Modoc Road is, hey, can you please enforce those parked cars that are there during the day? And the answer is sometimes. And then go back to the next slide. The reason I start at the other end of the corridor is because that's the one that's easy. This is the one that's more complicated that Jessica was trying to show you. And what she was pointing out with all these crossings, that those are for the users that are going to need more help and more safety and protection that would use the crosswalks. But if you're a commuter and you're coming from this direction, you're coming over here at the signal in you're in the bike lane, you've decided you're not even going to get on the new off-street path. You're a commuter, you're going fast, maybe even your electric bike. You're not even going to you're just going to stay in the bike lane. You're going to be on the street. So then you go through the signal. Here's the other option. You enter another bike lane, this is still a bike lane here. And then at this intersection up here or some kind of weed section, you come across into the going the opposite direction on the protected path. That is a reasonable move if it's done at the right location. And we believe that that many commuters will be okay with that move. They're strong, confident cyclists, and they will now be in a protected path without parkers. So when we look at it that way versus option one, and again, I don't think any option here was really, really great. The other thing, just to mention it, is you can imagine option two having the bike path on the other side of the street, and we couldn't do that because of blind corners, and we weren't comfortable with that. So we felt this is the option that balances the needs of the commuters and the healthy corridor that we've established and the new lower barrier users that need more safety.
Thank you. If everyone is ready, we could move to public comment.
I have another quick question. The change of the bike boulevard from Chino Street to Gillespie, I may be out of the loop, but that was like a little new to me. Can you explain a little more of the sort of? Wow. I know. I'm sorry, I missed a meeting. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little, just like a quick sort of why and how.
See if I won't have all of it here, but yet we did receive funding to do a bicycle boulevard along Chino, and then to navigate from Chino then to Mitchell Terrace, from Mitchell Terrace into Sola, and then basically it's the west side connection to downtown, and then it would connect to another future bicycle boulevard, also funded by the Active Transportation Program grant in the east side. So as we were in concept design and looking at all the details and the traffic analysis, what we were finding, and I don't have the good graphic that I had at the last presentation, but on the lower part of Chino, so south between Mitchell Terrace and Carrillo, there was a significant more trips than we anticipated or cut through from the Mason neighborhood going through the west side neighborhood and then on to using Mitchell Terrace, get to Cottage Hospital area or the upper downtown portion. And so our concern was that we were going to have to divert a significant amount of vehicle trips to the neighboring streets. And when we look at designing a bicycle boulevard, we try to aim less than 1,500 vehicles per day on the roadway. So we definitely had a lot higher. So what we were hearing from the workshops and where do people already like to bike that already feel comfortable at, it was Gillespie and San Pasquale streets, and we analyzed those streets, and those already have very low average daily vehicles, and the amount of trip diversion is really nominal. And so we're looking at a scope change with the California Transportation Commission on that. And given the price for the Chino Bicycle Boulevard versus Gillespie and San Pasquale, we could get basically 2 bicycle boulevards for the price of 1. And so that's what's in the works right now.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I ask a question? Just going back to that weave concept going eastbound from Las Positas, I may have missed this given that I'm new, but was there any talk of signage or lane markings, because that's a big change from the existing traffic flow for the current commuters? Yes.
Yeah, we haven't, well, I don't think we're at the point where we're thinking about that kind of level of detail, but yeah, it is kind of an awkward move. The people who are the locals will know it. I think the people we would be signing for are people who don't. And so we'd have to figure out the value and how we would indicate that. It's amazing how you would think signs would save the world. Turns out they really don't. And people ask for them all the time. And Derek's got lots of unique signs, and he's going to tell you which one he likes the best.
Yeah, signs are my favorite. For the users that are new to the facility, the way we would guide them through the intersection would actually be via the crosswalks. But it's the local user, the commuters, the ones that do it every day, that we are quite certain will figure out the fastest way to get across the street and into the path.
Right. As a former cycling commutist through this area, though, I'm most concerned about the drivers and their reaction to it, especially a big change like that.
Yeah.
Got it. So the signs would be for
Drivers.
Yeah.
Ms. Blackerby?
I think you had your hand up first.
Oh,
I
sorry.
had a
Okay.
question specifically on at the Mission intersection. And I think one thing that came up, and again, the discussions was around the canopy and the lighting. I noticed that there's an addition of a street light and what looks like 3 trees removed. Is that just confirming that and then basically opening up that canopy and further lighting that intersection? That's the strength of option 2 as well.
Yeah, committee member Milpas, that's what we're looking at with the funded ATP grant, is to put that section of a multi-use path. So the orange right here, and that this would involve a removal of about 5 trees approximately. And so again, it's just the rule that if we remove biomass in the city, we need to replace it. So that would be part of the design details on where that would go back. And it might not be right in this area. Again, this is for all road users. We heard this is just such a difficult intersection to navigate. So we do want to make sure we have really strong lighting and visual cues here. And then once we have that good line of sights, then we look for where to put vegetation placement.
Thank you.
Ms. Blackerby?
One last question for Mr. Bailey. If you could go to the I know, sorry to give you so much exercise today here. On slide, let's see, slide 9. Thank you. So when the path comes down here to connect to Gillespie, that's multi-use, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we talked about on a cycle track, bus stop, crossing will be up higher. Same exact treatment for a multi-use path? Or just a painted crosswalk?
Excuse me. As far as where the buses would stop in relation
Well, because there is
to
I didn't count
pathway
this one.
operations?
This is an 8th one, but there's a bus stop right there that's very well used and a giant queuing situation.
Mm-hmm.
For a city bus, I don't know what the school buses do. They use, I actually don't know where they go. But yeah, so I'm just wondering there of people queuing on the path. Are they, because right now they queue on the sidewalk. Who cares? But
Yes, we do anticipate that they will queue on the path. Right now, the sidewalk is, I want to say, about 6 or 7 feet wide. The after width will be about 13 total from face of curb to the back of walk. That's all the real estate we have to work with there. So as far as the queuing area, the ADA accessible area, it will double as the path. There is a real concentration of activity out there during pickup and drop off. So it's not going to be a fast moving path when there's a lot of students around. It's probably going to be a lot of students on skateboards, a lot of milling about. But once pickup and drop off is over, it really clears out. On weekends, it really clears out. So it becomes a really strong recreational route from the bike boulevard over towards Las Positas.
and then I'm curious too. I know you don't, with your ATP grant, you don't like turn in a fully cooked, construction ready plans and everything. But I'm just curious if there'd be a plan to, because I mean, what you're describing of these certain treatments at the bus stops, I think seems like an important component and maybe even a positive component of the project. So I'm just curious if that could be added in as part of it, since it seems fully cooked based on what you're describing, or partially what you're describing, if that could be actually in what's submitted and certainly what's shown to council. Is that?
Seems appropriate. We have put a lot of work into what you see before you.
Yeah.
We're now getting into some really more detailed operational details. And those require a lot more work. I think at this stage we're ready to go to the community, show everybody some of the options and the pros and cons that we've come up with each. And if indeed option 2 is favored by the community, as we're recommending, then it's time to start looking at that level of detail. And I think to what you're saying about city council, yes.
So, but this goes to council when?
Oh, that soon.
Yeah, so it's not
Then,
going back to the community.
No,
This
it
is
won't be, but it's certainly, we would want it to be in the grant application, that it's a essential feature that has to be built with the path.
And when is that due?
June 15th.
Got it.
And with all of the projects that we've had, active transportation program funding, community outreach doesn't end at the start of the grant application that if we follow from a concept all the way through to construction and then post construction as well. So it's continued outreach along the way and refinements.
Are we ready to hear our public comments concerning this project? That would be really nice. Sebastian Aldana.
Hello, my name is Sebastian Aldana. I did attend the workshop, the listening workshop. I believe that was in April at Harding School. And I don't live on the west side, but I was representing 90, right about 90 residents. They live at Pilgrim Terrace. I am a board member of the Pilgrim Terrace property and also the Terrace Foundation. And I did bring in a slip, or a letter actually, where the residents, they wanted better and proper street lighting and pedestrian lighting. So in the evenings, they could go for a walk, you know, flap their wings a little bit, you know. Right now they don't walk because it's dark. If you go there, you'll see that it's dark. I was on the table with Sam Fertner. I turned in the paper. And I know Derek also received the email from John Jeffries. But the lighting is not on the project. There was one person that requested it, but requested it for 90 people. I don't think on both workshops, the workshop at Harding and at La Cumbre, I don't even think there was 90 people. So that's 90 people requesting proper street lighting and lighting. And it's not even included. So I just want to make a point of that. On option 2, because the other concern they had was Puerto Suelo and Modoc. But can they, if you're coming from Las Positas, can they make a left onto the property? Because they have 2 driveways, so it's not a double yellow line. So they'll be able to, so then that's a good improvement for them. Okay. So then that one, so it was those 3 things. I do agree with Mr. Andres over there regarding the sweeping. I would say you should at least do it bi-weekly, because we have a bike lane right here on Coda. I think it's been operating for a little over 2 years. It was supposed to be swept as needed basis. I see it needed a lot, and I haven't seen it swept once. So I don't know if it has been swept or not, but that was a good point. I just wanted to mention that.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Okay. And just one other thing, because I know you said strong lighting, and this is you, Jessica, at Mission and Modoc, right there. You wanted it to have strong lighting, but then we also need strong lighting throughout all of Modoc.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wilson Hubble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, this is item 4. Am I correct this time? Good. My name is Wilson Hubble. I'm past president of the Santa Barbara County Bicycle Coalition. I'm also a retired senior environmental planner for the Santa Barbara County Public Works Department. Back in the day, Rob Dayton and I were out running around doing bike paths and other and sundry deals back in the Pleistocene, but we won't talk about that. And signs. By the way, I'm here to speak for myself, not for the Bike Coalition or for the County of Santa Barbara or anybody else, just myself. And I know on my comment slip, I made a comment saying that I was opposed. I'm not really opposed. I just had some comments that I think you might find helpful. First off, your staff has done a really good job. I went to the workshop that was held at La Cumbre Junior High. Really good turnout. There were a lot of people there, and also a lot of staff, which I was happy to see. Rob had all hands on deck. I don't know how many people you had there and what the overtime load looked like, but anyway, it turned out it was really well done. And the maps and everything else, I thought you really did a good job. And I want to congratulate you for that. I will tell you that one of the things about parallel paths, and that's what these are called, paths that are parallel to an existing roadway, they can be complicated. And if you look at the Caltrans Highway Design Manual and the AASHTO, American Association of State and Highway Transportation Officials, AASHTO, or the American Planning Association guidelines as far as highway facilities are concerned, these can be touchy, especially in an urban area where you have a lot of driveways, where you have streets that come into it. What happens is that on a bike path like this, especially on the option 2, there are a number of driveways, there are a number of streets that come in, and each one of those streets and each one of those driveways becomes a 4-way intersection for the bike path. And by the way, this is, we've seen this in other places. Out in the Goleta area, in particular in Santa Maria on Battles Road, a lot of driveways and a number of streets coming into it. To the same degree with the Caltrans bike path that's adjacent to Highway 246 in the San Ynez Valley between Solvang and Refugio Road, same type of situation, a whole bunch of, anyway, the question becomes who has the right of way? We're not talking about pedestrians here. We're talking about bicycles. These are non-motorized vehicles. And as a consequence, it becomes an issue. It became an issue in Goleta recently on Hollister Avenue between Stork Road and Gaviota, Stork Road and Winchester County Road. And it's been pointed out that Modoc is really critical for bicyclists. It is the best way to get from Goleta and UCSB to Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara City College. There is a huge amount of traffic in that area. And it's also part of the Caltrans Pacific Coast bike route. It's actually designated on state maps as being the way to get from from Oregon to Mexico as you're coming through Santa Barbara.
Well, Mr. Hubble, do you have one more point maybe? Because we're going over time
Okay,
here.
I'll try and make it quick.
Please.
The vast majority of cyclists on Modoc Road are what we call non-motorized transportation aficionados. They are people trying to get someplace from one point to another. There's another type of bicyclist, and I don't mean to put them down, but the other type of bicyclist is typically called pedestrians on wheels. And what's happening is that with Modoc Road, the vast majority of cyclists are not pedestrians on wheels. They're people on non-motorized vehicles, or in some cases on electric bicycles, motorized vehicles. They may not use the bike path. Chances are, especially if they're southbound and the bike path is on the north side of the street, they're probably going to take the road. The difficulty, and my big point here, is that I'm all for Class 1 bike paths. I've done a number of them myself. But in this particular case, the Class 2 project calls for the elimination of bike lanes on Modoc Road. That's going to be really controversial. And the Class 1 project does not call for the removal of the bicycle lanes on Modoc Road. What I would recommend, whatever you do, whatever you agree to, whatever you can do, is try and keep those Class 2 lanes. Because without them, if those Class 2 lanes disappear and bicyclists must take the lane rather than use the bike path, there's going to be a lot of unnecessary controversy. And you guys are trying to do good deeds here. You shouldn't be catching heat for that. Please try and find a way to do bike lanes on there if you possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jim Hernblatt? I guess so. Barry Remus? Oh, I apologize. I did note that. I'm sorry. Kim Stanley?
Is this on? Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Kim Stanley. I'm here on behalf of COAST, the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation. I'm the director of the Safe Routes to School program, and we'd like to express our support for option 2 because it offers the most safe route among the proposed plans. It would extend the multi-use path being developed on Modoc currently west of Las Positas to go all the way to Mission, and that's a really big connection for a lot of people. So it's a great connecting path. The path would also increase the safety for La Cumbre Junior High students interested in riding to school. Excuse me. And perhaps more significantly, it would offer more comfort for parents to allow their kids to ride their bikes to La Cumbre Junior High because they'd be on a Class 1 path away from traffic. We also appreciate the city's attempts to lose as few street trees as possible, and option 2 did a better job of that. The connection design at Mission and Modoc intersection and the new Class 1 separated multi-use path to San Pasquale are really visible green lanes that give bicyclists a specific place to ride, and that makes them highly visible to car traffic. And that's a really impacted intersection at Mission and Modoc. These safety considerations align this plan with Vision Zero outcomes, which is a high priority for Coast. And the placards along Modoc, I thought were great. I haven't seen those before, and I think it's a great way to make sure that all users of the current infrastructure can familiarize themselves with the potential change in the infrastructure so that you can get their feedback. And I wanted to thank city staff for their commendable efforts on presenting the options of the plan and for making sure that the community concerns have been heard. Thank you for your vision and your efforts, and thank you for the opportunity to express our support for option 2.
Thanks very much. Okay, Cole Wildenhaus, I think he left. Yeah. Okay, Jim Hernblatt, you're the last one. Yeah. And we really do. I know. Try to keep it just 2 or 3 minutes.
Problem.
Yeah.
Good evening, Lady Chair and board members. My name is Jim Hernblad, and I'm speaking in behalf of how Modoc is shaped now, the way it's got the bike lanes and the traffic is, well aligned. How many accidents have there been in the inception of this thing? If there's been none, why change it? Okay. So the other concern is the trees. Okay. We have wildlife that live in the trees. You take down the trees, you take down their house. And even though you replant new trees, they're going to be a heck of a lot smaller. And the forefathers who planted the trees that are there now were expecting them to grow to be as tall as some of the other trees we have in the city. If they get ripped out, that's a waste of taxpayers' money from the past, and due to future development, it's going to be looking like New York, because all the greenery is going to be gone. Parking on Modoc is obviously the way it is. Us drivers like it because there's no traffic, there's no parked cars on both sides. Now, on Lighthouse Road there for the elementary school there behind Lazy Acres, you can't park on one side from 8 to or whatever because the kids are going to school. They're walking, so there's no cars able to park on that side. You can do a timed parking on Modoc. When school's in session, no problem. Just when they get ready to leave, then they just have to move the cars. It just gives people a chance to be able to do that there. And the lighting that he was asking at Pilgrim Terrace would be great because it is dark, but I suggest it be below the canopy lighting like what MTD has at some of their bus stops. Just place those good and it lights up the parkway, but it doesn't light up the whole night because we have nocturnal animals, skunks, possums, raccoons, and when they forage in the dark, that's how they get around. That's why they're nocturnal. If you start putting a lot of lights out there, you got light pollution, and then they start to get disarrayed and cause other consequences. You know, you move them from one spot, they're going to gravitate to another, then they're going to be overpopulated, and then you're not fixing the problem. You're just pushing it off to another neighborhood. Gillespie is a good spot for that new corridor because they got the little speed humps already in place, and then they can go down to Mitchell Terrena and cut up. Chino gets really busy in the morning because everyone wants to get on Carrillo Hill. You know, other than that. So, short of that, I care for, you know, I speak for the wildlife because nobody really has a concern.
Well, thank you for sitting through
that.
such a long
Oh, it's okay. I
meeting.
just
We
want to make
appreciate
sure
it.
that everybody else is kind of feeling some sort of animosity to this major change that's
Thank you.
going to take place.
Thank
You
you.
all have a good night.
Thank you. Yeah.
So this is going to the council meeting in March?
Well, we have not made any decision yet. We just heard a major presentation, and now we're gonna. I'm thinking we should have maybe a motion and then some discussion about that motion. Yeah, or a discussion and then a motion, whatever works. No, I think we understand your concerns. That's good. Thank you. What's your pleasure, folks? Would someone like to make a motion to accept option 2 and then have discussion before, and then a vote? I'm asking.
I think
How would you
I'd
like to
prefer
do that?
discussion first, if we
Discussion
if we can.
first? Okay. Okay. You want to go ahead?
I'll let someone else go.
I'll wait. I'm the chair. Anybody else have some comments before we make a motion?
I'm pretty convinced that option 2 is
You're comfortable
I
with?
feel similarly.
balancing everything out.
Well, it's kind of a straw vote here.
I could give comments first.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much for taking time to answer our questions. Thank you to everyone who gave public comment. Thank you to the man who left and brought up the animals.
Yeah.
I see where he's coming from. So I guess I would start by saying that I will highlight the thing I like most about this project, which is the fact that both options create separation between the individuals biking and walking and between the motor vehicles. I think that it's the type of project that, I know that it's a type of project that research and data around bicycling shows that people who have separation just feel more comfortable, and not only do they feel more comfortable, but they are more comfortable, which is ultimately, or not just more comfortable, but more safe. They have less collisions with cars, and that ultimately puts this project very much in line with the Bicycle Master Plan and Vision Zero strategy. And so I commend both options for really prioritizing physical separation, which, and I would just remind everyone that, you know, the goal is to make sure that everybody feels safe, not just people who are super brave and super experienced, but also all of the young families and children that live along this corridor, and people who are in our city that, you know, otherwise may not ride a bike. I hope that this type of project will make them feel comfortable getting out there. So with that, I guess I will add, just jump in with a few specific comments. This is sometimes scary to bike it at night in its current state when you, for at least my personal experience, when you get past Modoc and it gets really dark and there's cars parked on the street and you're sharing that lane. Of course, I ride with a bike light, but I can't help but wonder, are cars seeing me? So I would second some of the comments that have been made tonight by the public about adding lighting. And I know that that's probably not in the scope of the ATP grant, but I would hope that maybe there's a, or maybe it is, that would be even better. But if it isn't, then I would hope that we could find some sort of city funding to add that, as it's a pretty critical amenity. Again, I would mention that this project is a gap in the California Coastal Trail. It's a gap in just our general city bike network. And so I'm really, it's gratifying to see it kind of moving along and the bike plan being implemented. I would just kind of second what staff have already mentioned about the delineators and exploring more aesthetically pleasing options. I don't know what the MUTCD and design standards say around planters. I know that they may not be approved yet for use in our streets, but you know, anything we can do to make this project look beautiful, I would support. One more comment about the actual facility itself. I would, for both options, support putting a bicycle box at the intersection of Las Positas and Modoc. Is it possible to bring that up? I don't know which slide it's on. Thank you. For people who are not familiar with bicycle boxes, they are essentially a sort of box that's painted at a turning space, and so typically, like, and I'll give an example using this. If you look at option 2, where on the right-hand intersection, if you were heading biking towards UCSB or Goleta, a more confident cyclist might merge into that left car turning lane. And this is what I do now and what many people do. You just kind of wait in that left turning pocket. And when you're there, you feel super vulnerable because this intersection is just extremely massive. I don't know why I guess because it was a Caltrans highway. But anyways, all of this is to say that you could paint a little box there and put a little bike symbol in it. And it's great for the person who's biking because they feel a little more validated and seen. And it's good for the person who's driving because they understand that it is okay for a cyclist to be on that left turn. And I'm assuming that a lot of more confident cyclists will make that maneuver just because it's what they're already doing and it gets you to the bike path quicker. I guess lastly, in terms of the two options, I support option 2. I like that it minimizes impacts to our trees and shade cover. Oh, sorry, am I supposed to give it? Okay. And then, I mean, I was actually really disheartened to see the... Okay, sorry, just asking a question of someone because I'm still somewhat new to this committee. I'm really glad that we're minimizing the impact to trees, so that's a huge part of why I support option 2. Shade cover, and the current canopy that exists there, it's really hard to kind of regrow those trees in our current drought, and I think that the shade cover that exists is really critical for pedestrians. I don't know the city's current guidelines on biomass, and I will have to do some personal homework on that. It sounds really interesting, just the word biomass, like. But I know that people, part of what is great about living in Santa Barbara is we have this just excellent greenery and beautiful trees that take, 100 years to grow. And every time we have a microburst and one goes down, I used to live on Anapamu, so I'm like mourning the stone pine still. But I wonder if the city could explore a policy of replacing trees at like a 2-to-1 ratio. I don't know if that's in the biomass guidelines already, but, I think that could help maybe make people make peace with the fact that, sometimes we do have to remove trees for other projects. I second the comments around sweeping. In terms of the bus stop, I just want to say that I would like for the bus stop to just be kept in mind through the design process, and that oftentimes if a bus stop gets pushed closer to the street, I think that the person waiting can feel a little vulnerable if they're just really close. So I would encourage whatever type of, street furniture that kind of shelters them and shades them and, makes it a relaxing experience. I mentioned this in my question, but I'm excited that this is a school connection and that you've worked with the school district and that this is going to be just such an incredible amenity for them. I would support the city exploring crossing guards just to help with any kind of confusion. I know that, our school district and teachers are super busy and they have so much to already do. And so as much as we can make this less of a worrisome thing for them, I would support. And then lastly, I guess I would support any sort of installation of a bike share station along this corridor because it's just going to be so bikeable. And with that, I don't know if this is already being discussed, but mailing a bike share pass or day pass or trial pass to the residents that live along this corridor and to the teachers that work at this school, I think that would be an excellent sort of invitation to get people who maybe don't have a bike in their garage or in their living room since their garage is being used for something else.
Sam's not here, too bad.
I think that would just be a really kind of interesting thing to explore. So with that, I'd support option 2. Thank you.
Would anyone like to propose a motion? We can have more discussion after a motion's on the table, unless you'd like to make a comment now.
I guess,
Sure.
Oh.
With your mic on.
There we go.
I move that we accept recommending option 2 to the city council, meeting all the TCC requirements. Yeah.
Exactly.
I should write.
Just
Oh,
sit
there we
up there.
go.
Yeah,
I recommend that we do that.
I'd second that.
okay. I have one comment before we vote.
Discussion time.
Yeah, okay. We've been discussing. I mean, we're just going to have a little more discussion, yeah.
There doesn't have to be more.
No. I live right along there, and the comments about Modoc, I really, really well aware of because I live right off Calle de los Amigos, so I'm right in that area, and looking forward to the new construction. I find it extremely distressing that bicyclists. My husband is an avid bicyclist. Say that first. Bicyclists ride side by side on Modoc, and it's 50 miles an hour at some parts. At my end, it gets better by the junior high school, but nevertheless, I know there's, as Mr. Hubble has pointed out, there's real pros and cons on the different types of bike lanes, but it feels like it will be much safer when all the bikes are on one side. We have so many 2, 3, 4, 5 bicyclists, the folks that are riding in their fancy bike clothes, and they just kind of want to take over the road and all talk to each other. So like if you want to be seriously biking, stay single file and seriously bike, and don't just chat as you're going down this road that's really fast. So I think the plans you have help mitigate against that sort of behavior. So I'm real happy about that. So that's my comment. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Hillary?
Yeah, of the two, I think option 2 is preferred and consistent with all those things. I love how we have so many strategies and elements and plans now. It's getting to be quite a list that we have to find that it's consistent with. I appreciate the work, and it's nice to see everything, all these projects build on one another. And obviously with the ATP success, we've been able to move, just sort of march through the city, not yet executing these projects, but funding them at least and programming them, which is great. I am interested definitely in lighting because it's definitely dark there, and I know there's other work being done in the west side and lower west plan to add lighting, which is why it was a little strange that it's not included in this gap closure, because there is a significant tree canopy and it's dark. And I know that's being grappled with, like along San Andres and all that. So I think hopefully some of that could be included in this little section, and I'd be interested to see if that's something staff is willing to look at, or if that was ruled out for some reason. But I do think, you know, light helps. Is there, yeah, I guess that's sort of a question.
Okay, I'd like to.
I have a question for you.
Or
I
Chair Rodriguez,
apologize.
Committee Member Blackerby. That is something that we can explore. I think as we put together the Active Transportation Program grant, that this would just be one piece in the overall West Side grant application. As you saw in, I guess, when we last meet, October, that there's also, yes, a lot of lighting improvements and crossing improvements along San Andres. And we have a long list of like sidewalk infill pieces, et cetera. We want to make sure that whatever the monetary amount we're putting forward still makes us competitive. So we can't put forward a $50 million grant, but so that's, again, what we'll take a look at, lighting and look at those key intersections for sure.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, shall we have a vote? All those in favor of finding that option 2 is preferred and consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, pedestrian master plan, and bicycle master plan, and that it be included in the West Side and Lower West Side Transportation Management Plan, please say aye.
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 Any nays? No, it's unanimous. We're very enthusiastic about this proposal. Whew, thank you all. Okay, let's move on to the Milpas Street corridor planning effort.
All right, switching neighborhoods onto the east side. Oh, can you hear me now? Perfect, okay. So switching over to the east side, we're looking at the Milpas Street corridor planning effort. As we mentioned, this is another potential area that we're seeking active transportation program funding for. The recommendation that we have tonight is to find the Milpas corridor plan is consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, and pedestrian master plan. Why we were looking at the Milpas corridor, and to be, when I talk about the Milpas corridor, we're specifically looking at from the roundabout to Canon Perdido Street. This section of Milpas is a Vision Zero high priority corridor due to a pattern of collisions along this roadway. There's a paving project coming up in the next few years. We wanted to do outreach with the community besides the general upcoming paving project and all the things that come with that. Is there anything more that the community desired? And if there was, then to prepare a grant application for that. And so we embarked this past fall with community outreach, similar style to what we did with the West Side and Lower West Neighborhood Transportation Plan. We held a listening workshop. We conducted a survey. We had a follow-up workshop in January, and now we're at the Transportation Circulation Committee. And then our target date to go to City Council, I believe, is on March 24th for this item. Just to recap, because we haven't reported yet of what we heard from the residents and businesses that are along Milpas. We specifically wanted to know the community's feedback with respect to 3 themes with walking and biking, driving and parking, and lighting. We wanted to know for each of those themes, well, what's working, what's not working, what needs to change, and what needs to stay the same. We had a really well-attended workshop, and then also a lot of post-workshop survey responses as well. So this is what we heard for walking and biking. That's also summarized in your staff report. But with walking, we had various responses on crossing and pedestrian flashers. but we will I will touch base on it further about how we can further enhance crossings along the Milpas corridor. We did hear that it's hard to cross the Milpas roundabout as a pedestrian, and that the sidewalks are narrow and in poor condition. For bicycling, we heard that bikes and vehicles do not mix well on Milpas. The concern of Milpas being a speedway if bike lanes are removed. Paralleling this listening workshop, and we had at the initial workshop, was also the Active Transportation Program grant that we are currently working on, is a parallel route to Milpas for bicyclists along Aliso Street, which will be a bicycle boulevard. And then you would eventually connect via Coda, Haley, or Ortega Streets into downtown. All of those connections will connect with the West Side Bicycle Boulevard as well. In general, going back to Milpas, though, that the bike infrastructure is inconsistent and that more bicycle parking is needed. With respect to driving and parking, got a lot of positive feedback that everybody likes the signal timing. There was discussion for a need for left-hand turn arrows that I will not go into detail tonight. It wasn't completely unanimous at the approach workshop. And then just other things, better visibility of driveways, general consensus to not reduce parking, concern of commercial loading in the center lane of Milpas, and we had various responses on the number of vehicular lanes along this section of Milpas. Is either 2 lanes or single lanes with a center turning lane configuration. For lighting, got varied responses for lighting as well, and but there was a general consensus that it should be improved at intersections. I'll touch base on that in more detail in just a minute, and that lighting fixtures should be consistent. Although we didn't specifically ask about these items, the definitely trees came up, and we heard very strong opinions about the trees, and strong opinions of yes, love the trees, do not touch the trees, love the tree canopy, keep it. Also heard completely remove the trees, we don't like them, start over. So what I'll show you in a minute is how we try to deal with that comment with a hybrid approach, and then just general maintenance and cleanliness of the street. Just briefly for the traffic safety analysis, this is just a heat map of the city of Santa Barbara with the collisions, red being the most collisions in the city, and followed by orange and yellows, and then greens being minor. If it's not a color, then we're not seeing collisions in that area, reported collisions. Along Milpas, there's about 20,000 vehicles that are along Milpas every day, and it's one of our principal arterials, and it feeds very major neighborhoods from the east side to all the Riviera neighborhoods, Laguna neighborhood, Lower East Side. So very important to move vehicles. What we're seeing is there is a concentrated collision. The primary collision pattern is distracted driving. We did recently reduce the speed along this corridor to 25 miles per hour. So at the approach workshop, the purpose of the workshop is, again, what we heard at the listening workshop, and then review the potential approaches and then receive feedback on those approaches. I will be discussing 3 approaches that did receive very strong support and that we would like to move forward with the Active Transportation Program grant. First item is just stronger crossings. As part of our pavement maintenance, this is something that we would install. It's this, the photo here, it's the high visibility ladder style crosswalk. So everywhere where there's a red star here, that's where the high visibility crosswalks would go. That's essentially, it's every intersection along that corridor, just out of the roundabout to Canon Perdido. What we're recommending for Yananali, there's existing pedestrian rapid beacons at that intersection. And this is also part of the roadway where there's 2 lanes in either direction. And we wanted to make it stand out, make it even a stronger crossing. We're proposing to have a mast arm flashing beacon added to this intersection. And then we're also proposing to have pedestrian flashing beacons coming out of the exits of the roundabout. And then, although it's not on Milpas Street, 2 intersections receiving a lot of attention is Haley and Quarantina and Haley and Nepal are 2. And so it would either be pedestrian flashing beacons and curb extensions, or just one or the other. That's something that, as we move forward in design, figure out what the best ultimate treatment is, with either just one of those or both of those at those intersections. So as far as for comments, when we asked for the approaches and for feedback for those that attended the workshop, it was pretty unanimous that yes, stronger these crossings would be great. For street lights, this is just a map of all the street lights along the Milpas corridor. There is a lot. Some things that we deal with around town is with the vegetation, blocks some of the lighting canopies. This area of Milpas for the trees was recently, the trees were trimmed in the fall. And it's just that's an ongoing thing of just tree maintenance along that area. But what we are proposing and what we did here is just, again, light up the intersections. There's a lot of pedestrians along the Milpas corridor. How can we really enhance these to make crossings feel really safe? So this is the existing canopy that is at a typical intersection. And so what we're proposing is those are the orange dots. In addition to the orange dots, we want to have lights on the opposite. These are the yellow dots. And so basically we're highlighting all crossing legs. So across Milpas and then on the parallel streets as well. And this is just an example of the slimline light that would go in at these intersections, which is the existing light fixture that is currently at these intersections. Okay, so this is the big one. What do we do with the trees and the sidewalks? What we're proposing is a hybrid approach. And it involves some curb extensions and curb realignments. This is a concept that you're seeing. It's not every block would be different, and every block has different driveway layouts, etc. So if we were to move down the corridor, each of them would look slightly different. It's not a cookie cutter type of treatment, but we would strategically put tree wells where there's existing trees. When the trees eventually need to be removed, then we would plant a new tree in its space. We're not at the level of what tree would that be yet, but that's the concept. And then you would fill in the sidewalk in behind the tree. And in some of this, the realignments, then we would move in the curb like by a foot to allow for when you're parking along Milpas, you have a little bit more room. Because when you do park on Milpas Street, and it feels very uncomfortable opening up your door, you feel like you're right in the vehicle travel way. And I'll just have a quick concept. It's just a cartoon drawing, but there is some spots along Milpas that the existing sidewalk is just 3 feet. It does get really narrow there. So this would be like a existing condition. We'd have build the bump out the curb with a tree well. And then the new tree comes in. And then we build the sidewalk here. And then that's as the tree matures. So as far as for the concerns from the residents to continue to have that canopy, it's meant that you would not remove all the trees at the same time, that over time you would still maintain that canopy, and then as new trees are planted, then it would fill back in. Again, when I show this is photos examples. It's not Santa Barbara, but this is just what we found in other areas with the tree wells and what that would sort of look like. Again, we would have with the Santa Barbara flare and a tree that makes sense to our urban forest. As far as for parking removal, there would be, because parking, of course, is very important, as we mentioned in all of our presentations. Parking removal would be approximately 2 to 3 parking spaces per side per block with that configuration. And so as far as those are the 3 main elements. So safer crossings, lighting, and then the tree management / sidewalk build out to get a better pedestrian network along Milpas. So as far as for what could be funded, the paving project would cover a high visibility ladder style crosswalks and then minor sidewalk repairs. So think of the little lips on a sidewalk that could be easily grinded. As you know, as you travel along Milpas, there are some launch ramps in the sidewalk from the trees uplifting the sidewalk. So that would be more significant sidewalk removal in those sections, and we'd work closely with an arborist to make sure that we wouldn't be damaging the integrity of the trees when we put in the new sidewalk pieces. But that would be something that when we go after grant funding, the street lighting, the curb realignments, and curb extensions. So our recommendation is that with those pieces that make up the Milpas corridor plan, define it consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, and pedestrian master plan. That concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
I have one clear. Sorry, Susan, go right ahead.
Oh.
Ms. Horn.
I don't walk on Milpas, so I don't really know what's there now, and I'm just wondering what are the current tree situation? I mean, is it built into the sidewalk with a little dirt around it, or what is it? Or is it all different?
It's mainly just just the landscape planter that comes in there. I guess it's surrounded by concrete in some areas, but it's really different by block.
Is it in the sidewalk?
It's in the sidewalk. Yes, there's no
bump out.
No
into the
bump outs.
street
No.
No planters or anything like that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to, oh, sorry.
Never get another nap.
What's being shown is just a Google Street View image of the street tree.
Yeah. Okay, next question.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a quick question. Was there any consideration for traffic treatments that would help for bicyclists who may have to use Milpas temporarily to get to Alisos? I'm thinking of I love that Alisos is ultimately going to be set up better for biking, but like if you had to make a left turn off Alisos off Milpas or something like that.
Hmm. Let me answer that. Oh, here comes Derek.
Here comes Derek Bailey.
Yay.
Hey, hello again, Derek Bailey, Public Works Department. Milpas is a challenging street for cyclists, and there's not much we can do to make it better for them. That's why when the bicycle master plan effort really went forth, the idea of a really strong route 1 block over from Milpas Street, how that came to be. Just given all the space constraints that we have on Milpas Street, we already have really narrow sidewalks, trees, parking, narrow travel lanes. There's just really no room to give and create good space for cyclists that we need to create safety, that we're really trying to provide those really high quality facilities for all ages and abilities. So no, Milpas Street is probably never going to be an awesome street to cycle on.
Okay.
I do want to add a little bit. Jessica, can you go back to that slide with the tree? I want to talk a little bit deeper dive in Milpas, because, the major function of public works and transportation, well, the mission to provide the sustainable foundation for the community to thrive. That's what we do. And the number one use to get around town is a car. And it's always going to be that, as far as we can tell. And so when we look at Milpas, this is a major arterial. In fact, Jessica showed you the volumes now. They were much higher when the signals were in. And with the freeway expansion coming, we anticipate the volumes going up considerably. So one of the interesting things about our compromise with the trees, we talk about the trees. Can you go to the slide with the tree? So stay right there. No, go back. Right there, the tree, literally at the tree, the sidewalk's 3 feet, and then the parking lane, that parking lane that you're looking at next to the travel lane, that travel lane, Derek Bailey's crew did a study to see the volume use on what's the number 1 lane, which is the one the car with the sunroof is in, and the number 2 lane, which is the one against the parking lane. And the number 2 lane is not used as much as the number 1 lane because it's so narrow. It's an uncomfortable lane to be in, and so there is a capacity constraint for vehicles here. So this project is not just about sidewalk widening and getting a consistent path, which will never be as wide as the pedestrian master plan standard, which I think is 10 for the travel, 8 for the travelway. So we're getting to 7. With that parking lane, go to the slide with that says 6 feet for the parking lane. Next one. See how that red line comes in? So the parking lane is actually going to move toward the sidewalk, into the sidewalk. So the sidewalk goes out with the realignment of the tree from 3 to 7 feet, but the curb line comes in to get that more comfortable feel, so more motorists feel comfortable using the number 2 lane on Milpas Street, increasing the capacity of Milpas Street, more comfortable for vehicles to be there. And then, Ms. Hanford, what you were saying is bikes more comfortable on Milpas. If they do ride, that's going to be more comfortable for them to take the lane on that side with cars further. I mean, I know it's just a foot, but we're really squeezing for every inch here, and it does make a difference to have that done. So I really want to point that out, that this Milpas corridor project really is helping all modes out. And the Alisos project, which is the parallel route, strong route for bikes, was really the first thing to go in. Now we're getting for vehicles and for pedestrians and stronger crossings. And that 7-foot sidewalk is going to make a huge difference. I realize it's not going to be day one, but somewhere in the future and along the way, each one will be widened. I hope that helps to understand that curb realignment.
Yeah, and what's the width of that travel lane that's currently squeezed, the car travel lane? What will it be after do you know off the top of your head? It's like 12, 13?
17.
With parking.
Parking lane.
Combined.
17 right now.
Okay, so
I can
it'll go to
interpret
like
for him.
18?
Here he comes.
Talking to the microphone. Yeah, from the face of curb to that white skip is 17 feet. So that only allows for a 7-foot parking aisle and a 10-foot travel lane, and those are bare minimum widths. So that's why we get a lot of complaints of side mirrors getting knocked off. If you've ever seen a bus go down Milpas Street, they have to take both lanes. There's just not enough room. So that extra foot actually makes a really big difference. 18 feet is what we have for shared parking and traffic right on Garden Street, right out front here. So once you go from 17 to 18, you're starting to get into an area where a lot more vehicles can stay in their lane. Buses will still be challenged with 18 feet. You really have to get more towards 19 or 20 to accommodate all users. But as Mr. Dayton mentioned, just that 1 foot means that a lot more vehicles are going to be able to stay in their lane. When we did our study 6 or 7 years ago, I want to see the distribution was around 70-30, the amount of traffic that uses the inside lane compared to the outside lane, just because a lot of drivers seem to be uncomfortable using that outside lane and they want shy distance.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I have a second question. What's the current parking restriction on Milpas, or is right now? Is it signed, or is it just?
Most of the street is 90-minute. There are some 15-minute zones mixed in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Horn?
Thank you. Before you leave, just wanted to ask, I sort of remember something about sharrows, you know, the signage on the street that cars and bikes can share. Did that ever, was that ever used at all on Milpas, for example?
Yes, the sharrows are mostly worn off. There are signs up and down Milpas that say cyclists may use the full lane. They haven't been really successful. And I think from our perspective, we would rather not encourage cyclists to use Milpas. We'd rather them move over just for safety's sake and use Aliso Street once it's built.
Thank you.
Please don't leave.
Yeah.
You never get to sit down. When is Aliso's going to happen? Do we know yet?
Construction is probably about 18 to 24 months away.
Okay.
We're just going into design right now.
Thank you. Mr. Malavos, did I say it right this time?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
good.
A couple questions. When it comes to the crosswalks and the ladders, the flashers versus the mast arm, what considerations go into what would be selected, or I'm just curious what feeds that? And then I got a second question to follow that.
Well, as far as the ladder crosswalks go, we're moving to that at all intersections. That's a standard now. So as streets are repaved, we're using higher quality materials that don't wear out as fast, and we are using the ladder style crosswalks that are much more visible than just two painted lines. As far as where flashers are used and what the layout of the flashers are, we're generally using the flashers at higher, more challenging crossing locations. So we look at the roadway characteristics. How wide is the street? How many lanes? What's the speed limit? What are the traffic volumes? And, you know, the wider the street, the higher the traffic volumes. Seems pretty obvious. It's harder for pedestrians to get across. So those are the characteristics that really go into which locations are most appropriate for the flashers. As far as the layout goes, what we've noticed is that the wider the street, the less, or how do I say this? Driver yielding is not as good on wider streets where the flashers are only mounted way on the outside. Take Outer State Street, for example, next to Mackenzie Park, where the new dog park is.
Yep.
There's flashers that are mounted in the median. So as a driver, the flashers are mounted really close to the center of your vision, as opposed to a wider street where it's kind of towards the outside. So what we really want to do is to get those flashers more towards the center of a driver's cone of vision, that we call it. On Milpas Street, we've looked into ways to try to get a median at Yan and Ollie Street like we do at Ortega. There just isn't room, and part of it has to do with the large Marburg trucks, the way they turn in and out there. They take up a lot of room to go to their yard down Yan and Ollie Street. So a median's just not possible. So that's where the overhead mounted mast arm with the flasher on the end of it comes in. We'd originally envisioned that when the flashers were put in on Milpas Street in early 2013. Unfortunately, funding didn't permit us to do that at the time, so we did a few other things to improve the visibility of them. But as part of the grant, we could follow up on that and implement what was originally envisioned.
Thank you.
That'd be great.
Second question to trees. Just more out of curiosity, when it comes to these projects and these trees, obviously long established on Milpas, it'd be kind of interesting. I don't know if there is like a known state within the life cycle of the tree, but kind of like a declaration as to our proposals to remove trees where they fall in that expected life cycle, just to know if it's how mature of a tree or if it's nearing the end.
Committee member Malavos, that's a great question and not a simple answer. When we've talked with our arborists, these trees, when we go back to old aerial data, it looks like they were put in around the 1960s, and they could last for many more decades. There are some that there is a disease going around for the ficus tree. It has to deal with how they think it's not specific to our community. It's happening all over. It's with the shearing of how it's done. That's how it's passed, gets the disease. But of all the trees along Milpas, there's only 5 at this point that are in the process for removal recommendations at this point. But so, quick answer is the trees. Majority of the trees are still very healthy.
Thank you.
Ms.
One quick
Blackerby?
question. I know that there's a proposal for, though it wasn't unanimously agreed upon of what intersections, whatever, but protected left turn lanes at some of these intersections. And I know we're sort of not wanting bikes necessarily be on Milpas, but the only thing I could think of, to your point, Ms. Sanford, was maybe at the protected left turn, a bike box in that turn. I don't know if the worry is, if you put any speck of green paint, then they're just going to come flocking to the street. But there's just one idea that I was thinking to see if that might be feasible, could be helpful. And obviously, if it was a protected left turn, it'd be a safer movement for everyone anyhow. So I don't know if that's whatever. I don't need an answer on that, but just.
We do have one public speaker on this. Could we move to that at this point? Okay. Barry, please.
Soon I'll need a walker. Good evening. I still have circulation. Okay, good evening, Madam Chair and committee members, and welcome committee member Collum. My name is Barry Remis, and I'm representing COAST, the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation. And as you probably know, we advocate for healthy and green ways of getting around, and that includes both pedestrian and bicycle access, transit, and rail. We'll leave out the rail for this project, but so we love to see this, and we are certainly supportive of your findings that that conforms to both the pedestrian bicycle and master plans, and also the Vision Zero. And as co-champions that fought to bring Vision Zero to Santa Barbara, we certainly applaud the design efforts and the conceptual plan here to add the high visibility crosswalks. Love to see those, the rapid flashing beacons, especially at the roundabout, which doesn't often happen. And so we really want to applaud that. Adding that safety element there, including also on Haley Street with the 2 additional intersections near, I'm not thinking of the junior high, but yes, Nopal and Quarantina. The sidewalk plan, excellent to see improvements being made, repairs being made, and this phased approach with respect to the trees. And be aware that I think we're dealing with some special interest groups, because I believe it's the Milpas Crow Coalition that is behind the No More Tree Trimming campaign. But anyway, so we're looking at, you've got to be careful. So this is wonderful to see, and so we're fully supportive of it. We hope that you'll find that it conforms to the plans, and be able to take this through to City Council so that we can see this happen again. And also, that perhaps one committee member might like to ask the question of staff about: is there a plan to physically remove the bikes may use the full lane signage, or would that remain? Curious about, for the cyclists that do still choose to use Milpas Street or will perhaps choose to use it, what type of signage might still exist, even though sharrows won't exist on the road, what that purview is there. But thank you very much for these comments.
Thank you. Okay, would anyone like to make some general comments, or would anyone like to make a motion to accept this recommendation? Or we would make the recommendation, right?
Have a
Yeah.
Find it consistent.
Yeah.
City business.
Yeah.
Oh, Chair Rodriguez, I think we were missing one
I'm
speaker
so sorry.
slip.
Well,
Okay.
obviously, I lost it. I thought I was. Yeah, it
Sebastian
is Sebastian.
Aldana.
Por favor.
Okay, my name is Sebastian Aldana, and I am an East Side resident, and I'm about 3/4 of a block off of Milpas. This right here, it is a big improvement. I'm very happy. A lot of ideas are being implemented here, and it definitely will enhance the Milpas Street. I know that right now it's 25 miles an hour. It's not being respected, because sometimes I'm on let's just call it the fast lane. I'm going 25, and people are passing me on the narrow one. So I watch it. I go at 25. So I don't know if you could put 25 miles on the road, maybe, because I don't know how many. There's about 3 or 4 signs on that 1 mile. People are just not paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I know there was a gentleman that wanted electrical outlets at the tree wells. This way they can put lights on the trees. And I do support the left-hand turn signals also. Living on Milpas, it's just something I feel that's needed, but we'll let the professionals deal with that. I do support it. I would say as a plan B. I do have a plan A, but then that would have to start from ground zero, and that's not going to happen. So. And then maybe, as far as the ADA requirements for the width of the sidewalk, I don't know what they are, but just make sure that the ADA requirements are met for the sidewalk and also the ramps. And I'd like to thank staff for the good work.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one other thing, a sufficient amount of trash cans.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I have a motion.
Ms. Blackerby?
I would move that the committee recommend that the Milpas Corridor Plan is consistent with the city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, and pedestrian master plan.
Second? Anyone?
I second.
Susan seconds. Okay. Was David you were gonna second your first time? Well, he'll still get to do that. Discussion before we call the vote? Any comments or discussion before we call the vote?
I have a few comments, but I'm happy to give them after we vote.
Oh, okay.
Should I not? Okay, I'll give them right out there.
Yeah.
I agree with the motion, but I just want to give a few comments at large. I commend the speed reduction on this corridor. I think 25 is just better and more safe. Just wonder if the city at some point might consider making Nopal a bike boulevard, similar to how San Andres will have San Pasquale and Gillespie as two alternatives on either side of the street. I think giving an option that doesn't require a bicyclist to cross Milpas and that would connect them to the CODA project and to the, that would be, I think, worth exploring. I certainly bike that route all the time as an alternative to Milpas currently. I support that there seems to be some parking turnover and the 90-minute restrictions on Milpas. I know that parking is a resource for those businesses there, and so I think making sure that there's a healthy amount of turnover, so people who are trying to get in there, get their business done, and then leave. I support that seems to be happening in most of the corridor. And then lastly, I think since some of this project did address some of the pedestrian crossings on Haley, I would just add that if we're looking at pedestrian and bike connections to Haley and to CODA, which are the two bikeways that connect to Milpas, and Aliso. So if you were riding a bicycle and you were heading north on Haley, that would be your route. And if you were trying to get across Milpas, you would be going south on CODA, most likely, if not further down on Canon Perdido. I think putting in some sort of traffic treatment like that shows the bicyclists where they need to be positioned to trigger the light would be great. Like some sort of bike signal. If we're touching those places, I would love to see like a little bike signal go in, so that way the person waiting there knows that they're in the right place to eventually make it over there to Alisos and the Alisos Bike Boulevard. And then I guess in line with that, I know that we just recently underwent a pretty big pedestrian wayfinding project, but if we ever in the future start doing a little more bicycle wayfinding, I think one way to encourage bicyclists to kind of leave Milpas and use Alisos would just to be installing signage at those other bikeway connections that let them know about the Bike Boulevard. Thank you.
Anyone else? I would just like to add that I was able to attend the listening workshop, and I travel on Milpas quite a bit because that's another part of town where I have family living, and I think these are very important changes, and I apologize for not remembering the name of the young man who was killed on Milpas in the thank you, Sergio, and I think it's worth mentioning Sergio Romero tonight because it was because of his death that many of these improvements were started, and it's gratifying to see them continue. It's very important, very important. So I just feel that the overhead flashers sound great, and at the workshop that I went to at the Franklin Center, was good attendance, high energy, a lot of interest and enthusiasm. And it's gratifying. It's really great to see. Your work is important. So I'd like to call the question, I suppose. Shall we have a vote? Yeah. Okay, all those are in favor of recommending that this corridor plan is consistent with city's Vision Zero strategy, circulation element, and the pedestrian master plan, please say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye, yeah, okay. Any, no votes? No abstentions? Unanimously passed. Thank you very much. Really, really great work. Now we are moving on to the Active Transportation Program grant application for Upper De La Vina.
Madam Chair, I'm going to introduce Derek Bailey, but I do want, just on that last item, I want to also acknowledge your comments about Jessica Grant's work on the Milpas workshop. Our listening workshop is really become a standard for us.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
You're right, it was very well attended, and her leadership and many of the staff who came and attended did an awesome job. So thank you for those comments.
Sure.
And Derek Bailey on De La Vina.
Good evening again. Derek Bailey with the city's Public Works Department. So this project is, as the title says, on Upper De La Vina Street. Just a little bit of background. The elements that are in this proposed project both came out of the pedestrian master plan, the PMP, and the bicycle master plan, which we call the BMP for short. So just looking at a map of Upper De La Vina Street is from a cyclist perspective. This is the State Street intersection at the end of this blue oval near Trader Joe's, and then this is the two-way section of De La Vina Street, and that ends at Constance Avenue. So there's existing bike lanes through this section, but for southbound especially, they just abruptly end at Constance. And that's where the De La Vina one-way street begins, and De La Vina opens up into two southbound lanes. What the bicycle master plan called for was to go down to one lane on De La Vina Street from Constance down to about Padre, which is the 1 block north of Mission, and down to one lane, and with the extra space gained, put in a bike lane. Busy map, but this just shows the orientation of some of the existing bike lanes in that neighborhood, as well as what is to be added as part of the bicycle master plan. So the solid lines are the existing bike lanes, and the dashed lines are the proposed bike lanes. And you can see everything's kind of disjointed in this area. There's a lot of gaps in the network. And it's an important area because it's a destination, Cottage Hospital, but it's also an area that people have to get through to get from the upper state area to downtown. So what the gap in the network really is, if you're going northbound, either upstate or Chapala Street, you have to jog over on one of the streets to go north on De La Vina. But if you're coming south, you really run into the end of a bike lane condition. And cyclists are often destined for either the Castillo Street bike lane, which is going towards downtown, or State Street. So what the bicycle master plan design envisioned was coming further down De La Vina Street, and then once you get to, say, Los Olivos Street or Padre, you could cut over to either State Street or the Bath or Castillo couplet. Part of a separate study is extending the couplets, Bath and Castillo Street, up to Cottage Hospital, so that's happening as a separate effort. If De La Vina Street is converted into a one-lane street, it would look a lot like Bath. This is Bath Street. This was repaved last year, and the buffered bike lanes were added. The lane widths on De La Vina Street might be a little bit different just because the traffic volumes are higher, but this is about what it would look like. So that's the bicycle master plan. So that would add or extend the bike lanes going southbound. The pedestrian master plan envisioned some enhanced crosswalks along Upper De La Vina Street at Quinto, which have already been completed, at Junipero, Nogales, and Pueblo. This is a page from the pedestrian master plan. North is to the left. So this is Quinto Street. That's the curb extensions that have already been completed. But the pedestrian master plan also envisioned enhanced pedestrian crosswalks here at Junipero, Nogales, and Pueblo. This is the Cottage Rehab Hospital. Very busy destination, generates a lot of pedestrian traffic. There's also a lot of pedestrian traffic that crosses De La Vina Street to get over towards Cottage, Samsung. There's a lot of medical offices in the area, so this is a busy area for pedestrian activity. As we were revisiting this, the pedestrian master plan, and revisiting this corridor, there's other important crossings in the area that we are considering as well. The yellow dots are crossing locations that we should consider. The kind of peach-colored ones are the ones that are in the pedestrian master plan. As you can see, these are the pedestrian volumes daily crossing De La Vina Street. So Constance, there's over 120 pedestrians crossing per day. Junipero, there's 136. Not shown on here is Nogales. There's another 80 that cross at Nogales. But those two streets are so close together that we should really pick a design that serves both. There's almost 180 crossings at Pueblo and 168 at Los Olivos. So Los Olivos is such a busy crossing location that it really makes sense to include that in a project as well. Other busy crossings in the area are where Nogales tees into the eastern end of Cottage Hospital, and as well Alomar and Junipero, right at the edge of Oak Park. So can we go down to one lane on De La Vina Street? That's the magic question. When the bicycle master plan was done, there was kind of a really high level analysis that was done of the street. Basically just it's kind of in the traffic volume range that it could work, but there wasn't a really detailed analysis done. And now that we're to the point where we're ready to apply for money for it, we really want to make sure that it's going to work before we apply for money for it. So traffic engineering, Badad Garagosli was here a little bit earlier this evening, but he designed a study that we performed this winter. The first step was to do a detailed computer model of the area, and that suggested that everything should work just fine. But then we want to verify that computer model. So what we did is we went out to De La Vina Street and we measured traffic and side street delay on just a normal traffic day with 2 lanes of traffic moving. And then the second day, we actually closed a lane. And we measured the same thing. We did all the same measurements that we did under normal conditions. And the results were very similar. There wasn't a lot of extra delay because of going down to one lane. So this table shows what the travel time is coming down from Constance down to about Padre. With 2 lanes, you can see the travel time is right around 60 seconds to get from Constance to Padre. If we go down to 1 lane, it's kind of in the upper 60s, about 70 seconds. And we think it's probably even better than this because we had a lot of cones set out the day that the lane was closed. Drivers might have been driving a little bit slower than they normally would once this would settle into a normal traffic pattern. The other thing that we're concerned about is side street delay. So if we take all the De La Vina traffic and concentrate it into 1 lane, we were concerned that there might not be enough gaps in De La Vina traffic that side street traffic could get onto De La Vina Street. But what we found is it's really not a concern. I'm going to just zip through these really quickly, but this shows eastbound Pueblo side street delay. During the AM peak, under normal conditions, it's about 15 seconds. The day we measured it, 1 lane, it was only 11 seconds, so it actually got a little bit better. We wouldn't expect that to be normal. I think if we were to perform this measurement over and over again, I think you'd find the 2 lanes are a little bit better, but this just really tells us that it's so close that it works. The same thing for westbound Pueblo Street, very similar results, 2 lanes, 1 lane. And then the other major cross street in the area is Los Olivos. And again, 1 lane to 2 lane for eastbound, very similar. And westbound, very similar. So this really confirmed to us that from a traffic perspective, this can work. It's a very feasible project. There's also some safety considerations with going down to 1 lane. This is a Vision Zero corridor, one of the corridors in the city that have been identified as having a high number of serious and fatal injuries. Between 2014 and 19, there were 56 reported collisions in this section of De La Vina Street. There were 38 injuries. 2 of them were serious, 1 to a pedestrian, 1 to a cyclist, the most vulnerable road users. The most common type of collision was a side swipe. And I've got a slide right after this that can illustrate that. And the second most common is a broadside. So that's like a T-bone collision. This happens a lot on one-way streets. We think that drivers just lose track of they're on a one-way street and they turn left from the right-hand lane and they cut somebody off and they end up getting sideswiped. So over a quarter of the collisions happening on this section of De La Vina Street are of this type. So go down to 1 lane and this conflict would go away. So right off the top, we would be shaving a quarter of the collisions off. And we would be creating an environment where driver yielding would improve to pedestrians. We're creating dedicated space for cyclists. So we really feel that going down to 1 lane and adding the pedestrian safety features would be a big safety benefit for this corridor. The planned grant application will definitely include buffered bike lanes on De La Vina Street, curb extensions on De La Vina at Junipero, Pueblo, and Los Olivos. And then as we're analyzing the costs, we're working with our engineering division to develop cost estimates for all these features. If it's advantageous that we can include other intersections, De La Vina at Constance, Bath and Nogales, and Alomar at Junipero next to Oak Park, they could also benefit from enhanced pedestrian features as well. So our recommendation this evening is to find that the grant application is consistent with the bicycle master plan, the pedestrian master plan, and the city's Vision Zero strategy.
Actually, we could throw in the circulation element if you'd like. I mean, just saying.
Just saying.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always excellent presentation. Questions, folks?
I had a, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to ask, the studies are all done on weekdays?
Yes, they were all done on weekdays. The traffic volumes on weekdays are a little bit higher on Upper De La Vina than on weekends.
Thank you.
You mentioned the Bath and Castillo couplet extension piece, and I know that was a part of the bike master plan. You mentioned that that was under a separate planning effort, but I sort of had an understanding that there was a feasibility sort of analysis done and that it was not deemed feasible to one-way those streets. Is that?
We know that it's not feasible to one-way Bath Street.
Okay.
Bath is, by making Bath a one-way street northbound, we create a lot of congestion on Castillo Street.
Mm-hmm.
So that we know. The Castillo part by itself is feasible. So that element seems there, or possible. But how we accommodate the extension of a bike lane northbound on Bath, we're still working on
It would
that.
be a singlet, not a couplet.
Singlet, yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Dave? Okay. Susan? Questions, anybody?
Nope, no
Okay.
questions, no
Um,
comments.
The only question I have is, I'm a little surprised the other part of De La Vina where Trader Joe's is such a nightmare. But this starts south of that, right? And this section is the higher accident section or collision section? Well, that, it just surprises me, that's all, from Constance to Padre, as opposed to State to Constance, because that's where De La Vina has Trader Joe's and people are going
Go one.
a bunch of directions.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Chair Rodriguez, the De La Vina, as we mentioned, is near the upper part of the corridor.
Yeah.
We didn't study that specifically, so I can't give you a comparison on collision frequencies between the two. We were more focused on what happens at Constance where that bike lane ends. We haven't studied the upper section in any detail at this point.
Okay, but you will, probably.
It's on our list. It's part of the De La Vina corridor, and as we mentioned in the staff report, De La Vina is a long street, and one single project isn't going to address all of the collision patterns that are happening on De La Vina Street, so we do have to break it up into bite-sized projects such as this one.
Well, that helps, thank you. All right, we have one public speaker. Barry Remus.
Not yet.
Thank you. Back, Barry Remis with Coast. Another great project that Coast is excited about, and we realize that there are some constraints here with what can be done. We also understand that there's a limit in terms of the ATP grant funding amount, et cetera. But adding a new bike lane is a step in the right direction, and so we're excited to be able to see cyclists to be able to continue their trajectory down De La Vina. We get and we understand why this project needs to terminate at Padre. We understand that the traffic capacity needs from Mission Street down to Carrillo, making sure my geography is correct, pretty much require the maintenance of 2 lanes and perhaps preclude a buffered bike lane. But that said, if someone's on a bike, and also excellent with adding the pedestrian element, high visibility crosswalks, et cetera. I believe curb extensions included in this. Wonderful, definitely. Back to the bicycling experience. If a bicyclist is traveling down De La Vina towards downtown, and they approach the termination of this buffered bike lane, Coast would love to be able to see and encourage signage, wayfaring, to be able to guide these bicyclists the way that they need to go, either to go to State Street or to find their way over to Castillo Street to be able to maintain a bike route with a bike lane. So we would encourage, investigating, looking into, and including signage for bicyclists along in the design of the project. And I think that's most of what we wanted to say. We want to appreciate this and thank you very much, and hope that you'll find this the findings to be able to move this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barry. I'm getting very tired. Do we have a motion yet? No, we don't have a motion yet. We just finished all of our conversation. Okay, would someone like to move to make this recommendation?
I'll make a motion to approve this recommendation.
I second.
Oh, okay. David Collum seconded. Discussion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just 2 quick comments. I would just add that one benefit of reducing the lane, because of reducing De La Vina to 1 car lane and adding that bike lane. I know there's a concern with car cross traffic that they won't have enough gaps to get through, but also for people biking, having only 1 lane to watch, I think, is an added benefit of this project that just wasn't in this report. And then secondly, I have a lot of friends that call this street De La Highway. I don't know if you guys have heard that. First time I heard it, it kind of broke my transportation planning heart. So I was like, what, De La Highway? And that is sort of this is counter to that. And yeah, I think in line with Vision Zero. So thank you.
About this side street delay issue or whatever, this used to be my neighborhood, and I think, and I still go through there sometimes, or have to shoot the gap to get to cross De La Vina in a vehicle, and some of the geometry of some of those intersections is a little goofy, and so when I put my motorist hat on, I would think the fact that I only have to watch for a bike lane and 1 lane of traffic is actually going to make it easier to cross in a vehicle, or at least will feel safer to cross in a vehicle, because now people are barreling down and you're like, because since there's parked cars on both sides, who's going to be zooming? I feel that if I turn off Padre onto De La Vina, people come at a pretty decent clip, and you got to be watching both lanes. So I think it maybe will delay turning, but I think the comfort in turning onto De La Vina will be much better for all users.
Okay, can we vote? We ready?
Yeah.
All right. All right, all those in favor of recommending this proposal for the Active Transportation Program Grant application for Upper De La Vina, please say yay. Aye?
Aye. Yay.
Yay, aye, or yes, all are acceptable.
Okay.
Any opposition? Unanimous vote again. We love it.
Yay.
Thank you very much. Now we need to do one small last thing, election of chair and vice chair for this year. We do this at the first meeting every year. So we need nominations for chair and vice chair.
Madam Chair, I would nominate Chair Rodriguez to serve as chair
For another year?
for another year.
What a surprise. I shall accept your nomination. And anybody want to be vice chair?
I could be vice chair.
Would you like to?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, I would do chair if you don't want to do chair.
this will be my last year, so I'll wrap it up.
Well, I nominate Eve Sanford as vice chair.
Thank you. Okay, shall we vote for the panel, for the slate? The slate. We're chair and vice chair. Yes? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we're done. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
We have one announcement before you go. I know that you're tired, but you'll be excited to hear. We'll have another meeting before we'll announce this again, but we want you to start thinking about it. On May 7th is in Cyclemania, and it's also a first Thursday downtown. Public Works is first Thursday for the downtown.
Yeah.
First Thursday, we're going to be doing a pop-up half closure for State Street from, wait for it.
This is
So
crazy.
from Victoria Street to Yananale Street. And so what it is, what the pop-up is going to be is this, and the reason we're calling it a half closure is because there's been a lot of discussion about closing State Street, when do you do this? And I know that's a very controversial thing, but it's a half closure, so what is that? So northbound traffic would be continued to be open to vehicles. And southbound traffic will be closed. It'll be closed to vehicles, but it'll be open to two-way. It'll be a two-way bike promenade. We're not sure exactly what to call it, but it'll be a place where people can bike. They can get rides on pedicabs. Skateboarders can be in that lane. So it'd be very much like what we talked about on Modoc. It'll be, but a more multi-purpose path on State Street from Victoria to Yananale. So a connection from the Funk Zone to downtown. It will be from Thursday evening through the weekend, and there'll be plenty of Cyclemania events. Kent Epperson of Traffic Solutions is also working with other downtown businesses to get people involved and do activities in the right turn pockets, because the right turn pockets on the southbound side. Let the record show Eve Sanford is leaving the building, so that there will be more activity on that side of the street. So it'll be very interesting. So we're hoping that you'll have a front row seat and you'll go out and try it and see if you like it. If it goes well, we're planning on doing it a second time in July when the bike share arrives, so that we can invite people downtown to try the bike share. So that's the announcement we have.
Thank you very much. That does sound exciting. It's been a long meeting, but a lot of really important material was covered, and I think as community members, we're really grateful for all your work and happy to serve.
Do you have the next meeting set up?
Yes.
Fourth Thursday in April.
All right. Calling an adjournment. Thank you.